Would limiting the age of the president to 65 be something you'd support? Why or why not? Any way you cut it, a shitty system will produce shitty politicians. Ranked choice voting, in my opinion, is the law that would best reform our political entire system. Why stop at the presidency? How about for all elected officials? I think the US should implement a ranked choice voting system. I think that will have a much bigger impact on our political system. The president sets the precedent. 65 is when it's time for people to retire. Sit down, make room, live out your days in peace. Set that tone for the American people. Yes, absolutely. Both Joe Biden and Donald Trump are way too old to be president. So was Reagan when he ran 40+ years ago. Hell, I'd even go further and cap the ages for all elected officials at 65. Yet, even arguments about mental fitness aside, I think we should limit to candidates who would at least be reasonably expected to spend a couple decades in whatever world they create. Edit, by the teats of Thor. This was apparently the most upvoted comment on June 9 of 2022. Reddit sent me a little badge over it. All politicians should fuck off the second they hit retirement age. Those who would hit it during their term shouldn't be allowed to run for office. Yes, I would. And if you need to know why, just look at Joe Biden, Donald Trump, and Dianne Feinstein, to name a few. This country has way too many geriatrics running it. I don't see how we could determine that 65 is the magic number for such a cutoff. People age at different rates. There are folks with dementia in their 40s and some 90 years olds are still sharp as a needle. The better question to discuss is how to fix the way the executive is chosen. Is there a way to do this that would tend to yield better executives and stop putting partisan hacks in office? Feels like something voters should be able to decide for themselves. What movie scares the hell out of you that isn't a horror movie at all? Jumanji. As a kid I used to have nightmares about those monkeys chasing me. Ever watched Pinocchio as an adult? That is effed up. The scene with the boy turning into a donkey and losing his S**t over it is downright dramatic and not the kind of body horror one expects from a kid's film. There's a movie I remember seeing with Brittany Murphy where she dropped off her husband for a medical procedure and came back to pick him up only to find out he never existed or something, and was made to believe she was hallucinating the entire relationship, etc. The thought of learning that anything in my life is a hallucination is terrifying to me. Another one I can remember was Premonition with Sandra Bullock. The movie itself wasn't the greatest, but the plotline is terrifying. Return to Ounce saw it when I was 5. Had nightmares about the Wheelers for years. My girl, when Macaulay Culkin gets stung to death by bees. Childhood me was scared of bees for quite a while. Spy Kids, I'm scared of the thumb dudes. The original Alice in Wonderland. It terrified me as a kid that she couldn't find her way home, nobody was really helping her, she was just stuck. Large Marge gave me my first heart palpitation. Edit, thanks for the awards everyone. Now I'm a rebel. I know it was meant to be a comedy and all, but Mars Attacks. Call it deep-seated child trauma from seeing it when I was too young. Watching people get disintegrated into piles of bones gave me nightmares for weeks. The Dark Crystal. What the fuck is that thing? James and the Giant Peach. Fuck that whole movie. Matilda. The abuse is fucking terrifying, and I remember thinking, who the fuck decided Roald Dahl stories are for kids? I was very young when I first saw the original Ghostbusters. I was not expecting the library ghost to do that. Never-ending story. Argyle was right. As a kid, the Mummy legit freaked me out. And by the Mummy, I mean those goddamn fucking scarabs. Hikers of Reddit, what has been the most fucked up thing you've seen? I had hiked in 15 miles to an alpine wilderness and just laid down for the night when a youngish guy in shorts and no bag pops out and asks me if I have water. I of course shared my water. He immediately said he had been hiking since yesterday. Apparently him and his friend went way back and off trail, skirting some cliffs along the way. Then he just says half-jokingly, yeah, his brains are everywhere. I laughed half-assedly, but he was sending off a really deadly vibe, not dangerous, just stone-cold shock. I asked him to clarify that last part, and offered him food and a cigarette. I also ordered him to sit down. He didn't want to because he would lose his legs if he sat now, but I explained he needed to sit a while. Long story short, his friend slipped and fell, and when he hit, his head popped and then his body got wedged in a crevasse. The guy I was talking to had spent all the previous day hiking around the cliff to find his friend, then had to hike out of the valley up the ridge and down again, all on tail a slope off trail. He was absolutely shredded, skinned, tore up. He was begging me to come with him and help me get his friend out of the hills. That's the part that really stuck with me. He got up and was about 3 feet into the bush when I grabbed him gently and said, "Hey, I got a phone, we'll see if emergency service works." Somehow it did, and I have zero idea how, technically or otherwise. We were standing in a glacial cratered alpine lake, 15 miles from the trailhead. I got rescue up there, and man, I was super impressed with their response. Within a few hours the first group of volunteers were passing my camp. These guys all looked like supermen, and they were. All night afterwards a constant stream of rescue volunteers. I stayed camp and made a comfy spot for them to rest on the way down. They had to wait up there in whiteout conditions for 6 nights, but rather than leave they kept a constant vigil over the hiker's dead body. When the weather broke, a chopper flew in and took them all out. I've never been so deeply moved and impressed with that kind of selflessness in something we regard as a hobby, a sport. Words that take away the very dangerous nature of it. Read all these stories and it seems most are deaths by slip and fall. Happens too easy, don't take the chance with your life. Deleted. Someone casually lobbing grapefruit-sized rocks downhill, directly where we'd been a few cutbacks prior. Didn't even think he might kill someone. This was Wisdom Tree in LA, so imagine a very steep traverse. Hiking a trail in Sedona alone, I heard a strange sound like thunder clapping. I stopped hiking, then a boulder the size of 3 basketballs comes bouncing down the mountain about 15 feet in front of me. Fucking yikes! Someone's backpack, jacket, and wallet left on the edge of a 2,000 cliff in a popular national park. Rangers found the body at the bottom the following day. I was on the Matanuska Glacier ice climbing, and before we started scaling the wall a tour guide walked up with a group he was showing around. There was a small waterfall, and he filled up his water bottle, explaining how this is the best water in the world, the most pure and blah blah blah. Anyways, we climb up like 20 feet, and there in the stream just above the waterfall is the dead and rotting carcass of some kind of bird or mammal, completely gray and directly feeding the waterfall he just filled up his bottle with. Hiking in West Virginia with my dad years ago, we heard a car up ahead and came over a hill and saw a tree fall on the back of a pickup truck. When we came up to talk to the guy and asked what happened, he told us his truck had started to go off the narrow road and got stuck, so he hooked a bungee cord from his truck to a tree and gunned the engine. He said he thought that the bungee cord would cause the truck to bounce back and then would be back on the road. Edit to add, just remembered this morning that my dad asked him if we were on the right road to get back to the parking lot we had started at. The guy told us if we kept going we would get to the amusement park, and there was a parking area there. We were confused about what he meant, then when we got there we realized he was talking about a Civil War museum. I was in the Frank Church Wilderness in Idaho doing some biological survey work. We were 30 miles from the nearest trailhead and got an early start to avoid the heat. About a mile into our hike, we hear the bushes stir near the trail. Up pops a man wearing nothing but a loincloth and Nikes, carrying a very small bag and a hunting rifle. He says mornin' and takes off sprinting down the trail. Never did see him again, so many questions. A few years ago a new hiking buddy climbed up a waterfall, slipped on some pine needles on the top and fell 40 feet down onto rock. I was the first person there, blood pouring out of head, broken spine, shine broke through the skin. He bit below his mouth and pretty much had a second mouth. It took an hour or two for medics to get to us and another 2 hours to use ropes to lift him out of the valley to a helicopter. Miraculously, he was out of the hospital after a few months and eventually regained full movement. All medical experts were shocked he made a full recovery. Most traumatic event of my life by far. Me and a friend were hiking in the mountains and heard what sounded like a hose bib running. We were deep in the mountains so there should not be water running. We tracked the sound to a large depression in the side of a hill and looked in, and there was a mass of rattlesnakes mating. The mass was huge and there had to be at least 100 of them all intertwined. Apparently that's how they mate. Massive snake orgies. Edit. Hose bib equals spigot equals faucet equals silcock. It's where you connect the hose to the outdoor water supply. Different names for the same thing across the country. I walked past a campsite with a ton of smashed alcohol bottles and trash. Started feeling uncomfortable and walked faster to where the trail looked over a canyon. Smelled something bad and looked down to see, like 3 feet from me, 2 bloated dead dog heads sticking out from a rolled up tarp. Immediately turned around and booked it to my car. I called the Forest Service to report it. I think some people got drunk and killed the dogs, or maybe it was a dog fighting thing. There may have been more under that tarp, but I was freaked out. I think if it was someone's pets they would have tried to bury them. My ex and I went for a little evening hike on the trails by our campground, and it felt eerie and kept turning around. We felt like we were being followed but never saw anything. When we got back to the trailhead we got chewed out by the park ranger because they had a lot of mountain lion activity and we weren't supposed to be out at dusk. That feeling I hope I never feel again. A well-maintained two-seater outhouse, numerous miles from any path or sign of human activity, just sitting there encircled by tall trees and dense overgrowth. The outhouse evidenced no sign of use or footprints in the area. Yet it was stocked with TP, magazines, freshly painted, and screens on the vents. I got in a scuffle with a pissed-off mama bobcat. More like a standoff than a scuffle, thankfully. I was screaming at the top of my lungs for it to go away. There was no way but forward and I was late to work. A woman I ran into later thought I was being raped. See, even she was cautious. That was what I was dealing with.